time for our weekly chat with Elliot Tepper, Carleton University political science professor. He joins us every week to talk about what's happening in the world. Hello, Elliot.
Good morning, Mark.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine. I feel like that. I bring that little ray of gloom and doom right in the middle of our glorious summer.
Yes.
What a wonderful summer we're having, and what a world to watch.
I'm not sure everyone would agree it's been a wonderful summer. This week has been nice.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, but many other days have not. I'm not complaining, but I've heard a lot of complaints. Now, why don't we talk a little bit about some of the very serious topics that are not getting a lot of attention, or at least not getting as much attention because of all the focus on John Kelly, Anthony Scaramucci, Donald Trump Jr., and the statement that was dictated. These things are not irrelevant, but I think they are trivial in comparison to, say, what the United States might do about North Korea. And there's been some pretty alarming commentary about that from certain quarters in the last couple of days. Indeed.
The circus is fascinating. I mean, it's riveting.
Sure.
But it's not the only game in town. And indeed, what goes on inside, whatever happened to the mooch and who says what to whom and where their knives are, all of that does matter indeed in terms of U.S. leadership in the world. And right now, perhaps the number one issue in the world is, nuclear Armageddon. There is a very palpable uptick in the threat coming out of North Korea. North Korea is now accelerating effectively its ability to become a nuclear weapon state. That is, a state with nuclear weapons, but also capacity to deliver them. They've now done 2 ICBM tests in 1 month, 14, I guess, in the last little while. They're getting better and better. They may not have reached their hyperbolic peaks, that is, we can reach anywhere in the world, etc., but they have certainly reached new highs in terms of ability to shoot a missile way up high and bring it back down. They are on the move, and the U.S. has taken notice. The world has taken notice, but we can't take our eye off nuclear Armageddon while the circus proceeds in Washington.
Yeah, and as I said, there's been a lot of commentary, including people saying things like the president said if there are going to be thousands of deaths, they're going to be over there and not here.
Right.
There's some belligerent talk now. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, still seems to be trying to take a more moderate tone, a diplomatic tone, at least at this stage. So who knows where this goes? But is there reason to be increasingly concerned, especially given the circus? Because when you've got a state of chaos within the White House, when you've also got a president who's looking for some victory, something to portray him in a more flattering light, sometimes there's a predisposition to turn outward and create an enemy where there might not be one.
Well, let's start just with the possibilities that with all of the forces in play, and forces meaning political forces, military forces, all the domestic dynamics of politics in China and the United States and Japan and so forth, the possibility of miscalculation is very high, and mistake. Let's separate those out. Miscalculation can mean just misjudging. Well, we know that if we do this, nothing's going to happen. Well, sometimes things do happen. So misjudging the other party's intentions and capabilities and acting on it can lead to war. We've seen this over and over again. And then there's the question of mistakes. Well, we didn't really mean to have dropped that missile on top of a Japanese freighter inside Japanese waters. We didn't really mean. So the possibility of mistake or a nervous soldier pulling a trigger. I think given all the forces in play, miscalculation and mistakes, quite apart from what we're about to talk about, I think are a real concern. The threat level has moved up a notch. Now, what's happened is, as you correctly pointed out, as usual, you put your finger right on a very key quote. The President of the United States has been quoted as saying by Lindsey Graham, he said this to my face, that if there are going to be thousands to die, it's going to be over there and not here. Those thousands are South Korea's allies. We're talking about South Korea's cities. We're talking about perhaps our allies in Japan. So the possibility that the president is contemplating a military action that can actually lead to massive numbers of deaths, but over there, that in itself, I think, is a great concern. It's not just about North Korea, of course. It's also about
China, it's about India, and Pakistan.
Right, we've talked about this.
There's a lot going on right now, and I think it's hard not to connect it back to Donald Trump in the sense that he's not responsible for any of this, but that in the past we have looked to the American president to be a calming force in some of these things, or at least have the ability, using whatever means, the carrot or the stick, to exert some influence.
Yes, and now but that era of strategic patience is over. I mean, part of the issue we have here are the multiple centers of foreign policy inside the Trump administration. So that takes us back to the circus in Washington, so that the United Nations ambassador is tougher than the Secretary of State in her rhetoric and so forth. But let's stay with the North Korean situation. General Mattis, the Pentagon chief Mattis, has been told he was ordered to update the military options, and he has now done so. He's presented the American president with updated options for military action. We've talked about this. There really aren't, as near as we can tell, any decent military options available on the table, and North Korea knows it, and that's the key. That is, as long as South Korea is held basically hostage to even conventional artillery fire from the north, and they also have, and this doesn't get the emphasis it deserves, enormous capacity to deliver gas and also biological weapons, not only in South Korea, but even to Japan. So allies of the West, allies of Canada. The possibility that the North could do all that stymies military action. So the possibility of a decapitation strike is so appealing. Oh, we'll send in the SEAL teams. Or somebody in Japan may be thinking that way. Why not? Japan has a lot to lose here. So all of the possibilities we see founder on the fact, the brute, dumb fact, that North Korea is holding South Korea hostage. There's no military option we can foresee at the minute coming from the West or coming from our allies. Now, China is another issue. So all the pressure, as we know, has been to squeeze hard on North Korea to make them think twice about doing anything, and to simultaneously to put a lot of pressure on China. Well, you act because we don't want to, but if you don't, we just might, and then you will have a war on your doorstep. You will have all those refugees, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so let's turn then to what we described earlier as the circus, because that has a bearing on all of this, but it's also, as you pointed out, fascinating to watch in itself. Do you think that General John Kelly, the new White House Chief of Staff, can turn things around? Is this a potential turning point for the Trump administration?
Yes, I've been describing this for myself, and I see it's being picked up by others. Have we reached a tipping point for the Trump administration at the 6-month mark, or are we at a turning point? The tipping point is this. Just as I was coming in today, it was announced that the President Trump will sign the sanctions bill that the House passed. The sanctions bill is a sanctions bill that the House passed unanimously almost. Both branches of Congress passed a bill against Russia and North Korea and Iran, and they put in there that the President of the United States cannot weaken those sanctions without coming back to Congress. This is an insurrection by Republicans in Congress. This is really a remarkable turn of events. They are no longer supporting their president. They are turning against their president, putting him on notice. And this is the greatest bipartisan unity we've seen in a very long time. So this could be seen as a turning point. Are the Republicans finally turning on the Republican president? And we see it in other ways, so that he tweets out to Donald in his normal way about transgender issues, and the chief of staff says, well, we're not going to implement that. That's not an order. Put it in writing. And Jeff Sessions is threatened over and over again, and then congressional Senate aides come to his rescue saying, you can't fire Jeff Sessions. If you do, we're not going to hold hearings on his replacement next year, so you have to leave him. So there's been basically a Republican rebellion at the congressional level. Are the wheels coming off the Trump presidency? Well, what about the base? You and I have talked about this, I think, more than others. None of what we see in the circus really matters as long as the Republican base holds together and the Democrats don't get their act together.
Right.
The Republicans in Congress are starting to act up. They're starting to rebel. Will this filter down to the base? We do not have good polling on this, but it looks as if there may be some slight erosion in the Republican base. But Still, the great hope is he's going to bring back our jobs and he's going to protect our culture. So the Democrats also put out a manifesto saying, we believe in economics, and half the Democrats are saying, no, that's not the issue. So the balance of power still rests in the upcoming midterm elections. Are we therefore at a tipping point? Has the Republican Party started to really splinter at the base? And the evidence is not yet, but maybe. What about turning point? Well, Senator, a general has been, a 4-star general, please, has been put in charge.
Yes.
The 3-star general, Mattis, now has to deal with his 4-star superior. And that's the kind of circus we're dealing with. What we so far hear is this. General Kelly is now Chief of Staff, and the Chief of Staff has been pledged loyalty by everybody who counts. Bannon, Ivanka, Jared, they've all said, oh, yes, we're now going to go to you first before we go to, waltzing in to see the president. I'm not sure how true that is, but everybody's saying, well, this might mean that this is a new opportunity for the Trump administration to move ahead. One of the fascinating things, because you were fascinated by the mooch, as was everybody else, here's the new director of communication goes on and makes the most horrific rant possible, just full of invective and locker room language I would never use, not even privately. So the president picks up the phone and fires Reince Priebus, not the guy who did the rant. That fellow stayed in his position until General Kelly apparently made it a condition. You want me to come on board as Chief of Staff, I get to do this, and he gets to send the mooch walking. So I think the initial signs on this are very mixed, but the president does now have a chance to do a reset on the presidency. And also keep in mind, we're still in good times. You and I just talked about threats from overseas. So far, they're mere threats. The economy is booming. Basically, the Obama economy is moving along very nicely. There's no major domestic terrorist threat so far. This administration has not been tested except by itself so far.
All right. Coming up, I'm going to talk about some possible evidence that John Kelly already is having an effect on Donald Trump's Twitter account. Talk more about that coming up. Elliot Tepper is with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today to talk about the big international stories, and we'll continue right after this. Elliot Tepper of Carleton University is with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today. I find the following quite interesting. Donald Trump on Saturday tweeted 13 times.
Yes.
And many of those tweets were about all kinds of different, the typical tweets that you would read from Donald Trump with hashtags like fake news and MAGA, Make America Great Again, talking about the healthcare bill, talking about the stock market being up. Yesterday, he tweeted only 3 times, including a tweet about people saying only the fake news media and Trump enemies would want me to stop using social media. Today, though, he has tweeted only twice, and both those tweets look a lot more like the tweets that a different president would send out. One of the tweets is simply about small business owners powering us into the future with some pictures of an event that he attended, saying, read more and watch here. The second tweet being a sharing of a video of when he honored a Vietnam veteran the other day at the White House. Those are the kinds of tweets you normally see from a president's account, not from this president, but from a kind of a normal Washington scenario. Those are the only tweets he sent out today. Are the more conventional.
We're reading tea leaves, aren't we? Well,
I think that may be a sign that John Kelly has, for now, reined him in a little bit.
Well, also, there's been a long pattern of Saturdays being his major tweet day because, his Orthodox son-in-law, Jared and Ivanka, are off to services, and when they're not there, he tends to have lots more tweets. This is a known pattern.
Yeah.
Also, there's a pattern in the past of somebody temporarily putting some kind of a common sense approach toward the president to constrain him. Constraining Donald Trump has been a losing proposition.
Sure, and I'm not saying it'll last forever. I'm just saying I find it interesting that today...
we do have this chance that this can be a reset mark.
Yeah.
A reset time mark, that he might this might be an opportunity to begin a new phase of the Trump presidency. We were talking about the sanctions just a moment ago, and I think something important about the sanctions should be said, that not only are there sanctions that the Republican Party put in front of the president in a way that he couldn't refuse. They made either he accepted them or his first veto would be overridden by his own party. So he really needed to sign it. The president, therefore, is going against what some people are saying was his centerpiece in terms of foreign policy, be nice to the Russians. Now is this, these sanctions. My view on this is simple. The Russians may not be getting what they want in terms of sanctions out of the Donald Trump presidency because of what we just saw. However, whatever the role of the Russians in investing in the Donald Trump presidency, bringing him to power, whatever that turns out to be, and remember, the Mueller investigation is all about whether there's a crime involved. That's hard to prove. The Russians are getting a wonderful return on their investment because Washington at home, domestically, the presidency is in dysfunction and in turmoil, and then abroad, looking overseas where you and I spend our time when we can, they have a president who is abdicating the role of American leadership. That's a great return on the investment, whatever the Russians did or did not do in investing in this presidency.
Did you want to talk for a moment about Venezuela?
I do.
Because that is another kind of undercovered story because of everything that's happening elsewhere in the world.
Well, also, we skirted very briefly on nuclear threats. The India, China, Bhutan situation. Again, now we have a red line there. We have two powers there that are nuclear armed who are backing into a conflict neither one wants, and will they find a way to avoid it? Keep an eye on that one because this is, again, two nuclear armed states. Venezuela, just about everyone is calling this a turn toward dictatorship. Not everyone, not, of course, Maduro. But what we see is two things. One is Latin America has had a long, long history of recurring episodes of a democracy wave and then a wave of return to some kind of the term banana dictatorship comes out of Latin America. Nobody wants to go back to that. Venezuela, I think, does not harbor a trend. It does maybe reinforce the oil curse. States that have abundant natural resources have found themselves over and over again, and we saw it in other parts of the world, and perhaps the entire Middle East, find themselves with governance issues, and we have it there. And Turkey, at the same time, is now being widely in today's press and yesterday's press being talked about as turning toward a dictatorship. So the term dictatorship is back in places that were democracies. That, too, is a trend to keep an eye on in world events.
Okay. We'll have to stop there, Elliot. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'd like to say it's always a pleasure. Let's have a good news day sometime.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there will be some good news at some point.
I'll look for it.
Yeah.